Thank you. How are you?
Good. I think with this series, I kind of compare it to like in Law and Order. You can keep going on and on because there are plenty of stories that you and Stephen and everybody else can come up with. Now it's a matter of injecting Robyn's storyline with the stories you're coming up with. So coming to season 2, how long ago was their game plan as far as where the arc would go?
Well, our sole writer, creator of the scripts, Oliver Lansley, who we've been working with and developing this for many, many years, always kind of had sort of the broad strokes of where the show would go if we were lucky enough to get subsequent seasons. So it's not like there was a completely solid game plan, but we kind of have an idea of where we wanted the show to kind of go. Yeah.
Now, did it shift after season 1 and you got greenlit for season 2 and you see what's going on in the world and see how you wanted to play Robyn, like how different you wanted to be from season 1?
No, and what's actually really interesting is that these scripts were written, the first ones for season 1 were written probably 5 or 6 years before we shot them. And with the exception of having to go through and update that, it's now Instagram and Twitter and how the news cycle works. It was really fascinating how much nothing had really changed, even though it feels like everything has changed. It's one of those things where the stories felt as relevant when they were first written as they did by the time we came to shoot them. And as far as sort of changing our course per the world around us, that doesn't really factor in because these are still the stories we want to tell. And sometimes things end up having more social relevance depending on when the show ends up being seen, but you really can't predict that. But they all come from places of, I think, quite authentic truth, even the really dark stuff. So it's actually been kind of fascinating to see how things can become more relevant than you thought they were. But no, we don't sort of veer in one direction or another, depending on the kind of the social climate per se, because that would sort of undermine the integrity of the show. And I think what's interesting about a show that really is comfortable in its own, frankly, moral ambiguity is that we don't really pull our punches. And some people might be offended and some people might think it's the best thing they've ever seen. And hopefully most people laugh because there's some very dark humor. But yeah, no, it's been interesting though.
Stephen's directing 5 and 6, the episode. And it's funny because, he's been a part of it, along with you. And now he's the one behind the wheel. It feels like you guys are in a car, but this time he goes, let me get behind the wheel. And you're like, okay, it's been a minute since he last directed, so how was it like, obviously watching him from the technical standpoint of him directing the episodes?
He's a brilliant director. He directed a bunch of True Blood. I was also in his feature directorial debut that we produced together. And I love being directed by him. He's a very naturally gifted director. And I'm not just saying that because I'm his wife. In fact, because I'm his wife, I definitely wouldn't say that if it wasn't true, because I'm not that person. I'm a tough crowd. We have a creative shorthand that, grew over the years on True Blood, and that is just, you can't really, I've worked with some extraordinary humans who are directors, but there is the emotional trust and intimacy factor, especially as the season of Flack goes further and further down a sort of very wild rabbit hole of Robyn's sort of inner demons coming to light. Having him directing those last 2 episodes where it all kind of comes to a pinnacle was actually really amazing for me because I have complete and utter trust, and he also knows how to, frankly, take care of me while pushing me to the absolute brink of, my limits.
As much as we mentioned, all the stuff that's going on with the social media, do you see the show in a way as being timeless? Because you can keep telling stories, and those stories could have been 20 years ago, 10 years ago, yesterday.
I mean, yes. And that's the interesting thing about people not really learning from history, is that humans do kind of keep on perpetuating the same strange cycles of dysfunction and social problems and issues and crises. And, you know, obviously the show's all very heightened because it's in the world of PR and celebrity and things, but it really, it does seem to kind of stand the test, you know, because a lot has changed in the world since we all first were sitting around many years ago. But none of it, other than literally having to change, oh, it's on Twitter now, it's not a physical newspaper, you know, none of it really felt, it didn't feel dated. And that's
having
kind of
said
amazing.
that, you know, having said that, you know, you can keep going on with the storyline without having to go through, you know, the pandemic crisis. But considering it's set in London, you know, do you think it would be challenging continuing the storyline if you had to throw in the pandemic crisis?
I mean, I've worked on shows that I've shot things during the pandemic that were not specifically, one of them was not set in this era. It was, so it didn't have to take that into consideration. One was, I think sort of creatively, you kind of decide to go for it or not. I think it would, I mean, obviously it would just be an extra kind of thing to work in. I don't know, we'd have to all kind of put our heads together and decide whether or not that was sort of for cosmetic reasons or if it really felt like it pushed the story in one way or another. But again, you know, that when you're too tied to what is the absolute current news cycle, then it does kind of mean your show is going to end up dating itself quite quickly. Not that people will soon forget this incredibly devastating global pandemic, but you know what I mean? Like that would be a decision that I think a lot of us would have to really kind of put our thinking caps on and think sort of, you know, about, do we care more about commenting what's happening right now, or are we looking to create a show that in 20 years time, someone's going to stumble upon it and go, wow, this is bizarrely still relevant.
Either way, it's something to, it's fun to
yeah,
watch.
I don't think there's a wrong choice there, but you know, either way.
It's an escape and it's fun and it's good talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Likewise.